Hello and welcome back to the Improving Season podcast. This is me, your host, Pascal Steve. I have a very, very manly voice now. It's not because I drank whiskey the entire time over the past couple of days. No, I'm just a dad who caught, once again, a little bit of a cold this time. On the other end, it is my co-host, Steve Hall. Hey, how are you doing, Steve?
I was just thinking your voice sounded particularly deep. And I was like,
yeah.
When we were talking off air, it didn't sound like that. You just put this on. I want to, now, I don't know why you haven't watched. Oh, no, you have. You've seen The Mandalorian, right?
Yeah, only the first season, though.
Oh, my God. You need to watch season 2. Okay, anyway.
Do you have Disney Plus?
Yeah, I have Disney Plus.
Yeah, I don't have Disney Plus, so that's a problem.
It's literally worth it just for it. Like, I've rewatched it like 2 or 3 times.
I mean,
not that many.
We've been in a situation where we wanted to watch something and realized, oh no, this is Disney, because they own so much, especially for kids, you know?
Yeah, it's good for the kids.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we were in the situation of like, should we get that? But we already have Amazon Prime and we have Netflix, and we don't even watch television anyway that often, so only for that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I need to get rid of my Crunchyroll, but on a different note, I was just thinking, I just want one of these Mandalorian helmets to put it on and how it changes your voice. That'd be pretty epic. Maybe I need to get one for the office, just a Mando helmet, just in the corner. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that it would be pretty cool to participate at a cosplay event at some point.
Oh yeah, that's especially too far for me.
So a very, very cool costume, right? Yeah. Maybe you should be the Mandalorian.
That would be sick. Like a Mando costume would be really cool, actually. I have Grogu, so I need the Darksaber, though. I don't have the Darksaber. I have the...
I'm completely out of what it is that you're now referring to.
I was going to say, you might not know what that even means. I won't throw out any more spoilers. I don't even know where that came from. But yes, I'm the co-host today, apparently. I'm here.
Yeah. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm thankful that I don't have a cold. I was actually just saying to one of my clients today, he works in hospital, and so he got ill recently. I was like, man, I'm so glad I don't have one of these occupations or kids who are bringing home sickness all the time to me, because touch wood, I very rarely get sick.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that Katie is working in a public facility with kids, so basically at a school. And she's hardly ever sick. Maybe she's just immune to like bacteria from kids, germs from kids and stuff like that. Maybe there is something. Because I do remember when one of my first jobs, that was still when I was living in Flensburg, for 3 months, I was working in a kindergarten. I don't know if you even know that, Steve. Have I ever told you that? 3 months, though. Just to help out, because there was someone who was pregnant and couldn't actually continue working. And one of my bandmates, he was there working full time. And he then asked me like, okay, we're looking for someone. And I had some experience working in that field before. So I was helping out for like 3 months. And in the first initial days and weeks, I was constantly sick. And then like after that, I was immune for a very, very long time.
Kids are they're full of it.
Fucking assholes. Oh, sorry for the language. No, they are beautiful. They're lovely.
I was going to say, maybe Katie, she just really like her garlic. I think a really high garlic intake apparently helps prevent sickness.
I think, though, that I'm eating more garlic than she does.
Garlic's really good. I wish I ate more garlic. I think I'm too lazy. I need to buy the lazy garlic.
Yeah. But I rediscovered onions. I'm
onions
saying
are
like,
great.
Yeah. I'm saying like rediscovered, because there was a long time where I didn't have it, because if you don't cook them and eat them raw in something, right, you stink massively. It is really awful. And also, it makes you really gassy overall. However, now I rediscovered it, doing it in a pan, right, stirring them, freaking amazing, and then put them into cottage cheese. It is freakishly delicious. Or something like, you can also do it like on potatoes, for example. Also a good combination.
I'm just laughing
amazing.
at the freakishly delicious.
It is.
I don't think anyone said cottage cheese is freakingly delicious before.
That's how you see. That's how you realize how fucked up it is, what it is that we are doing. But honestly, I was just once again rediscovering that, and ever since I've discovered that for myself, I've been having that once again regularly. And there are just so many things, and that reminded me once again. Like, I have a couple of recipes that I love. Like, honestly, these are so delicious, and yet they are only like 500 calories in total, right? And they are very, very, in quotation marks, clean. Everyone knows what I'm referring to. Wholesome foods, not highly processed, all that kind of stuff. Give you a very, very good balance overall. And yeah, they are just great. And that once again just makes me realize, like, it is not that hard to actually stick to a caloric deficit if you know how to cook and if you have some experience with that.
Can I say something that is freakishly delicious, but not wholesome and minimally processed that I've been eating? I can't say
apple cinnamon Cheerios, Apple Jacks.
They are good, but it's not that. It's you probably have access to these. It's in Lidl they have these buttermilk pre-made pancakes, which are like, I don't know, so big, and there's like 4 of them in a pack. They're in the bakery
I've
section.
Seen them at some point, yeah, but I've never bought them.
So I toast that, and then I put on some golden syrup. I have that on my post-workout meal, and that's freaking delicious. That's like, I was like, oh, I could eat this. Like, if I was served that in a restaurant, I'd be impressed.
I would like to know. So down in the comment section below, if someone has ever tried that. So first and foremost, cooking the onions, and then, or just doing them in the oven. That also works out. And then combine that with cottage cheese, and let me know what do you think about this. Maybe some people in the comment section are just like, what the hell is wrong with you? And also whether you had or have tried something like what Steve has had. Well.
It's basically like an American breakfast.
Yeah.
Just
that's what I was
pancakes.
thinking about as well. Have you ever had a maple syrup?
Yes, it's just incredibly expensive compared to golden syrup. And essentially is the same fucking thing. It's just sugar.
I've never had it. I have no idea.
It's nice.
Yeah?
I recommend, but it's expensive.
Yeah. But I would assume you need to get the original one in order to really like taste the difference.
Yeah, I guess you can probably go that far. When I'm eating something like that, I'm just like, it's all really good. I'm sure there's it's probably like coffee. Like, some people like their coffee, and there's like levels to it. So there's probably someone listening who's like a maple syrup aficionado, and it's like, you have to buy it from this Canadian tree specifically.
Yeah. We have probably some Canadians listen to that. If you are, I don't know, willing to sponsor us for one round of maple syrup, I wouldn't mind. Just reach out, and then I'll give you not my direct address, but the address to the next postal office, and then you can send it over there.
You have to be careful. It's very calorically dense.
It is? Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, yeah, I can see that. It's kind of like a form of just sugar, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's easy, to just get carried away and just like, fuck it. That's what we're doing in Vegas on our chicken waffles. That was maple syrup that we had on there. And I've been to Canada, and I did have Canadian maple syrup, but I don't think I appreciated it at the time. Everything's maple syrup over there.
I thought this is just a cliche.
No, I was going to touristy areas, so it makes sense. They like, you guys fucking know we love our maple syrup. Let's sell you all the maple syrup, They say A a lot, which is why I'm saying A.
Oh, all right. And
I won't try the accent.
How's training going on your end?
Yeah, good. Just halfway through now, week 3. So it's getting to like the shit's hitting the fan a little bit, kind of repetitions and RERs and amounts of volume. So it's going well. I will say the 3 times per week frequency is probably starting to beat me up quite a bit. It always does. After I run it for more than like 2 mesocycles, it starts to just like beat up my like joints a little bit. And so I have to go back to like a push-pull legs style of split. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm just still hitting some good numbers, still kind of getting used to some of the machines at Yorkie's, like the leg press, for example. We spoke about it last time. I'm still trying to find my way with that particular piece of machine, just to make sure I'm kind of using it correctly and not causing any problems. But I just hit 160 kilo straight leg deadlift for 10. And that was at 2 RAR versus previous mesocycle. That was my final week. That was my final week performance last meso. So definitely going to hit some PRs this mesocycle, which is exciting.
Incredibly strong. But I always do. Well, I remember that I always admiring you for your posterior chain strength. Even like 2-3 years ago, I was quite impressed with how you executed something like RDLs and SLDLs and also good mornings, and still been able to maintain good posture.
I think it's the glutes, which is not what I really want.
Yeah,
I'm not too worried about
I can see that.
Yeah,
but this is always what strength coaches preach, right? Like glute and core strength. This carries over into other lifts big time.
So yeah, I'm enjoying like just being bigger and having better energy levels and thicker, and I think the more and more you do go in and embrace off seasons, you just continue to enjoy them. And yeah, the thought of competing isn't even on my mind. Like, I'm not eager to diet again. I'm not eager to compete. I'm eager to just progress, because I just know I need to really level up my physique to be as competitive as I want to next time. So I just have no kind of thought about competing, just because it still surprises me when people ask like, oh, so you're competing this year? And I'm like, I competed last year. Leave me alone. Like, why am I going to compete this year? It makes no sense to me. There are some people that maybe can do that, but this is a situation, I think you're the same, Pascal, where I'd have a very skeptical eyebrow, where I'd be like, competing year on year? Are you a Jeff Alberts, or I don't know, someone who's like maximized their genetic potential, or kind of, you need to have a good reason. It's not something that's just like a normal thing, I don't think, for a natural bodybuilder to compete year on year.
No, absolutely.
How's your training going? I know, have you managed to get some more titty pumps?
Yeah, a little bit. It's going better and better also on that front. I'm going to lay off my vest the next week, because then we're coming up to 6 weeks. And then it's, like I said already the last week, this is basically the general consensus of like wearing the vest for like 6 weeks. Often it is the recommendation is due to liposuction as well, so fat removal, which is not what they've done with me, because I was lean enough on my chest. But I was just like playing it safe here, and I still had some swelling, and I think that it may have helped here over the past couple of days to further improve it and enhance the recovery process. I still have some swelling here and there, but the pain is very much now fading away, and is also getting better and better with movements overall. I'm more confident in my movements as well, allowing myself more things. And yeah, I think that, so next week I have one more training session to go. Then I'm doing a deload, which still gives me another week of recovery. For the chest, where I'm then still already continuing doing some light work for the chest, and then after that it's back to normal.
And is that your first time then implementing a surplus as well?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
You can really use the maple syrup.
yeah. Because last week, or the last days, I was still doing like the quads. And then I was already incorporating some presses there, and I was already now adding more and more weight. And as I told you, I eased my way into increasing the weight. I was really feeling it out, moving it slowly, and by that increased my confidence. And I felt fine in the sessions. I felt good afterwards, and that's why I'm now ramping it up. And especially like 6 weeks after, it's now going for it again.
That's so exciting. Like, it seems, I imagine, I don't know actually, I'd have to ask, but I imagine it feels like it's been a long time, but to me it's like, oh, you're already back training again.
Yeah. At first it felt like a long time, the first 1 to 2 weeks.
I bet.
Because so much pain was still there and present. And it felt, so whenever you come out of something like that, may it be something like a severe injury that is still so present because it first happened, it feels like you will never recover from that ever again. That sensation haunts you. And then in the moment, it just feels like a lifetime. And you think that it will take you a year or 2 years to ever feel good again. And then time passes by, the body is doing its job, and then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks have passed and you are back to normal again. And that's how it was for me as well. It was kind of an exponential increase in time, so an exponential acceleration of time. So the longer it has been since the surgery, the kind of shorter it felt. So the faster time, the faster time has moved on, so to speak. So actually, I look back and be like, no, that was actually quite fast. Whereas in the beginning, time was moving very slowly, right? And then all of a sudden it picked up pace, and then I didn't really notice that anymore, especially when I'm now going into the training sessions. The nerve pains have also dissipated now. I've told you about that, right? On the left side, whenever I was doing a specific movement, I was experiencing nerve pain on my rear delts, and the same kind of applied on my right side on my lats. And on my right side on my lats, it sometimes still flares up when I'm doing like a specific movement, such as the most muscular, hands clasp most muscular. I do feel then still kind of a stinging sensation in my right lats. But yeah, things have improved super, super quickly. And especially once again, the longer or the more time has passed, the faster it has felt that I've been recovering from that. And now looking back, I mean, coming up to 6 weeks now, it's crazy. It doesn't really feel like it. And now it also makes you realize that it's then coming up to 3 months ever since we were stepping on stage at the WMBF already.
Wow.
And that's crazy. That's crazy. Doesn't really feel like it at all.
I can remember that day like yesterday.
Yeah. And now here we are already 3 months past that, right? And that's why it also keeps things in perspective when it comes to like the entire journey around the training and nutrition, that time is passing by so quickly, and especially if you don't really make a fuss about things, don't really stress about things too much, but you're just like continuing ticking off the boxes. All of a sudden, a lot of time will have passed, and you have done everything that you can, and you have probably made a lot of improvements instead of stressing about the here now, the present moment, and like, oh shit, what has happened in the past, yada, 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 right? You're concerned with things that you can't really change at all anymore. And you may also be concerned about future events. And you can't really control the future events anyway. And even if you think that you can, it's kind of a fallacy, because you never know what the next morning will bring, right? If we could, then everyone would be rich, because we could always go into the stock market and predict what will happen with the stock market. But we can't. Right? So living just in the moment, just doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing is everything that you can do. And by that, time is moving by or passing by much, much quicker.
Yeah. I think it's a good reason for, I mean, in terms of applying to training nutrition, not swapping, like keep the goal and not change things too much, but also don't get complacent, because that time will vanish and rush by.
Oh, yeah.
So it's important to stay on top of it. But I think some people think about staying on top of it, and by doing so, they're switching things all the time. And that's like the way to just yo-yo. And I see it all the time where people will hop between different things. It's just like, no, stay consistent with something that actually works. And then you're on the money in those And when you have that with clients, like you have those clients who just, they check in every week, then very rarely, if ever, miss a training session, always hit their protein, like we talked about last time, virtually always hit their calories as well. And you're just like, they just have their, like, just ticking the boxes every week. And their check-ins are a joy, because it's like, and sometimes you actually, with those sort of clients, you get to dig into the real, like, nuance, and kind of, you get to understand them further, and you get to just like tweak the little things that are the 1%, because they have all that shit under control. But it's quite rare, I think, that people have so much of that and they can really benefit from the nuanced stuff.
Yeah. And now that I've been thinking about it and brought up like the financial or the stock market, there's a saying of like, time in the market is beating time in the market, right? So time in the market beats timing the market. So the thing is, when you're always trying to predict what is about to happen, you basically burn out in the sense of like that you will be losing everything, because that's just so hard to time the market. However, time in the market is like you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? You are having conviction with something and you just ride it out. And that's the same when it comes to training as well. You're taking, or you have conviction in what it is that you're doing with your program. You took care of the fundamental principles, and then you just like ride the wave, because you trust what it is that you have will be paying off in the long term, instead of always like changing things up here and there, trying to optimize things, when in reality, in trying to optimize things, you do the contrary thing. You actually make things much, much worse.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews, and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description.
I absolutely agree. And actually, on that note, I was going to ask you, when you get back into your training, are you making any changes, modifications? Are you trying anything different to what you've done in the past? How's it looking?
Yeah, so probably it's like so the funny thing is, over this mesocycle, I've already started to incorporate more and more, because I wanted to start off slowly in terms of volume, also for the entire body, because I wanted, once again, at first, I didn't want to put too much pressure and blood flow into the chest area. And now, when I'm fully starting, then the focus still holds true to what I said before the surgery and after the shows, that I want to focus on bringing up the abs, bringing up the chest, and bringing up the delts. These will be my main focuses, and I will then plan the workouts around that. So probably increasing my frequency on the abs and the delts, because that's just something that you can easily do. And then on the chest, probably just like going for exercises that I just feel so much more in my chest, to be honest. Because I think that in the past, I've always opted still for movements that I thought that were necessary, when in reality, they didn't really give me that great of a stimulus. And that's why I'm probably going or opting more for those movements that just feel good, that makes me connect with my chest the most.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's also something you can't really do until you're at the level you're at, in terms of, you just don't have the ability to understand mind muscle connection and feeling the pump and disruption in muscles. Like, you don't have that much clue into your muscles. So you just got to pick movements that have tried and true to the tested time, and has improved people's chests for a long time. And then once you got those down, you got the basics down, then that's where the little things can come in, and you can really start optimizing your SFR. So that sounds really good, actually. And when you're saying delts, you mean mostly side delts?
Mostly sides. And this time I'm actually stepping a little bit more away from dumbbell work, because in the past I still tried to have a huge variety of exercises, which in reality, if you really think about it, doesn't really make that much sense. Only because you have a higher frequency of training work for then a specific body part doesn't mean that you have to do it each and every single time that you're working that body part a different movement. You can have more of a cyclical approach of like, I don't know, I'm training 6 days per week. Then you can have like, I don't know, 3 different movements only. but then repeating that cycle like twice throughout the week, for example, instead of having a different exercise each and every single day. Because the strength profile and resistance profile of dumbbell work for the lateral raises or for the side delts is, in my opinion, not as great. And cable work and machine work is so much better, in my opinion, for then the side delts than anything that you can accomplish with dumbbells. And that's why I'm probably going to opt only for like cable and machine work for that.
Yeah, I think I just sometimes, especially once I've done dumbbells for a while, going to cables just feels so good. And cables don't tend to not feel great. They tend to stay great for quite a while. One I really liked, I introduced a while ago, which I'm kind of annoyed. I kind of can do it. I kind of can't do it at the moment, is kind of cross cables from behind. So you take it from the opposite side and then you come out.
I'm doing them. And they're great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I did them with you, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like,
this was the first time, and ever since then I have them in my plan because they feel great, honestly.
They feel great. I have to do them single arm at the moment, so I'm still doing them, but it's just annoying that I can't do them both at the same time. There's something about doing them both at the same time that's nice and also time-saving, but yeah, unfortunately, don't have that ability.
Yeah. The beauty is with cables, you can do them in many, many different ways. Whereas with dumbbells, you're quite limited when it comes to that. And yeah, once again, then also comes back to the resistance and strength profile as well. Cables are just giving you so much more for on a per rep basis, for much less fatigue, I have the feeling as well. So the frequency you can run already quite high on the delts, but you can even pound them and target them much, much better with cable work as well. And yeah, that's why I'm reverting back to those and then doing just like a lot of lateral raises or lateral raise variations. And then, ab work is just like keeping in mind what the abs are there for, right? The physiology, the mechanics of the abs, and just doing a lot of flexion. And it's so funny because in the past, I think everyone is starting off with training the abs in some way or another, but hardly anyone is able to really get a good stimulus on the abs. Right now, I'm doing like body weighted crunches, and man, I get up to around 15, 16, 17 reps and I'm done. Simply because now I understand the mechanism behind what the abs are supposed to be doing. And if you keep that in mind, and this is where then the knowledge around biomechanics can actually be quite handy. But you don't have to know each and every single bits and piece of then what is really going on or so. Just know the mechanisms behind it in the sense of like, okay, what is the muscle actually supposed to be doing? And then trying to take advantage of that and really kind of roll in and then lowering under control. And this is something that I can recover from quite quickly as well. All right. And then also there you have many ways of going about it. You can also do something like reverse crunches or do them weighted with a cable stack or so. And that's what I'm focusing on as well.
So what is your I'm assuming, I won't assume anything actually. What's your frequency on abs and delts going to be?
So delts is going to be 6 times per week. This is not that far-fetched from what I've been doing before. Before I had like 4 times per week for the side delts. And then abs is probably going to be 4 times per week just because I don't really like that as much. And probably I'm going to increase it to 6 times per week at some point. But keep in mind, I'm not targeting those like as a primary muscle group. But it's more like at a lower volume per session, such as 3 to 4 sets, something like that. And could even sometimes be as low as 2 sets if appropriate.
Yeah, it's funny. Once you know how to train the abs, you can really feel where something else is taking over. And normally for me, it was the hip flexors. Yeah. So if I'm thinking, I need to do more range of motion, and then it's just hip flexors, and it actually makes it easier. Whereas if I keep the tension on the abs, which is what I'm trying to target with an isolation and movement like that, it makes it much harder. So yeah, I want to still grow my abs, but they're less, like they built quite a bit in my previous off season. So I'm glad that I've been able to put them on the back burner a little bit. So I'm only doing those 3 times a week. but you're kind of making me think maybe I should increase my side delt frequency.
Yeah.
I'm at 3 times a week for those as well, but also rear delts are at three times a week.
If it works for you, then it works for you, right? Now, also in terms of then the abs and what it is that you've been, or what you've just brought up, this is a common phenomenon that you see with weighted cable crunches. The way too many people, nearly all of them. People would be surprised of how many times I'm prescribing that to my athletes. I see the numbers in the spreadsheet what they are using on a weighted cable crunch, and then them telling me like they don't feel it in the abs, and I'm like, all right, send me a video, and then nothing. I'm not surprised that nothing they can't really feel it in their abs because they don't really train their abs at all. They keep their upper body straight and they go down and crunch at the hips or so. And what I found is really helpful on the weighted cable crunches is really severely lowering the weight up until the point where you are capable of only doing the flexion at the abs, which will take a lot of weight reduction for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, it's a much smaller range of motion than people think because you're just getting a full extension and then you're trying to bring, I guess, your shoulders over towards your pelvis. But once they're shortened here, you're not like people will shorten them and then they keep going. And that then is all just like the hip flexors coming in. And once you've done it enough, you start finding that differentiation. It took me a while though. It's like lots of training where you can feel it. And then it's like, oh, now I can feel something else is going on here.
I mean, for me personally, there was a moment where I was like using the entire cable stack. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. I'm not that strong. And I must probably revisit my technique and form and what I'm doing here. And then at some point I was just like deciding, all right, let's just drop the weight on the cable stack by a lot. And I mean by a lot, right? So going from the full cable stack down to like 1/4 of the cable stack. And all of a sudden, I had so much more control. I, for the first time, really could feel my abs. Not because the entire body was actually exhausted because you're moving the weight stack, but because the abs are getting to that limit. And I think that this is a common thing that you are experiencing with the vast majority of exercises. Once you're getting to the point where you are then questioning like, okay, am I really truly hitting the body part that I intend to hit? And you take a step back, you reduce the load, and all of a sudden it really clicks. This is, I think, the moment where you are capable of really making strides forward.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's even like, I mean, it applies to every exercise. It's so, I can think of so many different muscles and so many different exercises where I'm like, once I got clued into the mind muscle connection, I could really feel, and I kind of, like you said about the kind of understanding of biomechanics, you kind of, once you can get that good mind muscle connection, you almost, in a way, don't need the full understanding because you feel it. You're like, oh, I've taken off the tension where I didn't want to take off the tension. Oh, I've kept the tension where I wanted to. And by default, by feeling it out, you can kind of get that. And at least that's been my experience with a lot of kind of my lifting. And then when I learn the kind of biomechanics potentially afterwards, I'm like, oh, that falls right in line with what the like seems to make sense on a skeletal model or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and you don't have to go as far in actually understanding how the engine of a car is working, right? If you just want to drive the car, you don't have to be an engineer or a mechanic to be able to lift, right? And that's kind of the same here. Of course, does it help? Sure. It's the same when it comes to the discussion around, do you have to compete if you want to be a bodybuilding coach? It does help, but doesn't mean that it automatically makes you a good coach, and vice versa as well.
I'm going to repeat that analogy because I remember you telling it to me and I was like, you need to say this analogy to the world. And that was like to drive a car, you don't need to know the internal mechanics of a car, like how the engine fits together and all the specifics of kind of the parts and what you need to be able to do things. You just need to learn how to drive it. Yep. And you need to know some basics like turn the ignition and like your gears or whatever. And then you go and learn through experience mostly. And I thought that was a perfect analogy to like having a basic understanding of the human body, how it works, and then go experience it, because everyone's that little bit different within the gym. You'll find some movement, like is to say there's a perfect exercise that just suits everyone amazingly is just beyond like a fallacy completely. Yeah, sure, on average, maybe there's better and worse exercises, but we certainly can't be that true. And so that's where, like, we've just been talking about, that experience comes in. So I thought that was a great analogy.
And this goes even further, right? So someone who hasn't really taken their license for driving a car, he can learn everything about the engine and how the car is actually being built and how it's run and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't make him a good driver. He has never taken the license. He's not allowed to actually drive on a road. Whereas someone who has been driving, I don't know, a cab for like 20 years or so, has completed like hundreds of thousands of kilometers on the road. He's probably a very good driver. And maybe he knows nothing about cars. And yet he's a good driver.
I think that's where you can always analogize it to the coaching aspect as well, where you see these like elite coaches who clearly don't really follow the science. You say they don't follow the science, but they don't keep up to date with studies and stuff. But a lot of what they do is correct through experience, and they're really good because of just going through and taking so many people to stage or through the process. And then when you combine the two, that's the sweet spot.
Totally. And once again, it may then be able to help, right? If that person who learned everything about the car and how it's run takes the license, maybe he will get or become a better driver much, much faster because he understands the mechanics of the car as well, and how you are supposed to actually then shift gears and so, because you know how to properly do that in order to, I don't know, save some gas, spare some parts of the engine as well, and all that kind of stuff.
So that was the question of what changes are you making. So no, like, I mean, training your delts 6 times a week is interesting. I think it's just one of those muscle groups where it's like, it always feels like it could be trained. Yeah. Like it's not one of those ones where, I don't know, for me, I don't know, there's some muscle groups where they're not necessarily like sore or obviously fatigued, but I just know my performance is not going to be great. Whereas like the side delts, yeah, they're definitely, like, I have never moved to much higher than 4 times per week just because of like thinking they should probably have a rest day or more rest days. But I'm very interested to see how that goes, because if your performance is in a good place, I mean, like, no one can talk down to that.
It's something that I've done already in the past.
Yeah.
It's nothing new, though. So I know that I can recover from that. I think, though, that in the past, I wasn't as good in targeting that muscle group and feeding it. And by that, it could be that I was capable of having such a high frequency. The thing is, though, what that indicates to me is that I can get away with at least going through the ranges of motion that often, which often is the limiting factor for most people, right? So when you load the joint too often, it always goes under or through a certain range of motion under pressure, and that wear and tear is just too much for some people. And most commonly, it is something that people are experiencing either in their knees, hips, or in their shoulder joints. And if you then have too much of a frequency, something is then kind of, I don't know, very, very irritated at some point. Because I know that because I've trained my delts 6 times per week already in the past, I know at least from going through the ranges of motion with load, something that I can recover from. Even if I didn't really target my muscle groups as appropriately in the past, I know that at least the pressure and the amount of workload I can handle from a joint or connective tissue perspective, which is already good, right? That I know this. And then it's more about like, can I recover from that muscularly speaking, which brings me to the next point, which something that we've talked about, I think 1 or 2 years ago when we did our Q&As, and someone was asking for like 7 days a week training. Why can't you just like train 7 days out of the week? And that question came up in one of the latest podcast episodes with Menno once again, which it came out here on Saturday. By the time of the recording, it will come out on Saturday. And you also then said like, yeah, I I think so. My gut feeling would say like you need to at least have one rest day. But if you really sit down and think about it, you can't really find a compelling reason as to why. And I was thinking about that very hard myself as well, because why can't we have a dedicated day for the muscle groups that recover very fast on the 7th day, when systemically speaking, it doesn't really kick your ass too much. You can recover from that from a connective tissue perspective. Why can't you then have a 7th day if it doesn't really or if it's not detrimental to your private life and to your psychological health as well? And I really, really couldn't find a compelling reason. Because everything else, if I were to say, no, you have to, or you need to have like a rest day at least once per week, it's just me parroting. It's just me repeating what I heard someone else saying without ever questioning the rationale behind it and the reason. So a compelling reason for that argument, and without questioning the context behind it. I could see that you need a rest day if you are, I don't know, super strong, you're a power lifter or so, right? You're also putting a lot of pressure on your connective tissues, or when you are systemically always burned out, or when you have a very, very hectic life, you can't really make a room for that. But just from a connective, just from things or perspectives that are brought up of like, if you're able to recover connective tissue wise, systemically speaking as well, has no kind of implications, detrimental impacts on your private life, I really can't see a compelling reason as to not to do it. What's your take on that, Steve?
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, this is where we discussed it a while ago, maybe not to this depth. And then obviously I spoke it through with Menno, and I said like my bias has always been have that one rest day. But when I rationalize it out, I couldn't think of a compelling reason why. The only thought that's running through my head, in addition to everything we've said here, is kind of, we know how important recovery is, and like hypertrophy and growing is essentially like over recovery, because now you're kind of getting past the point of recovery and you're growing. But it's a case of like, if the muscle damage has gone and you have recovered, like, are you just waiting more days and it's just over recovered? Like, what's going on there? Because I've had it previously with like a muscle group like calves. Like I would train those every day, and I'd be like, I just couldn't tell if they were growing. And I'm like, am I training them too much? And you just get into your own head because muscle growth is so slow. So it's just I have no, it's something so hard to follow, but it's like you said, and rationalize it out in the terms of if your progress in the gym is going fine, you're not getting any kind of issues with pains and connective tissue, and I mean, progress is good, you're recovering well because your progression is not coming down. I can't really think of a good reason why not to do more. And I guess it comes into that of like, are you doing more for the sake of doing more because you can do more? And that's what, like, it's that old argument, you know, like, is more better if you're recovering, or is it now?
It's funny because these are, now that you've talked through it, this is exactly what came to my mind as well, of like one of the arguments that I could make against that is only because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's like, I think two unknowns are opposing each other. On one side you have like, okay, if I were to do more, would I grow more? And on the other side it's like, if I were to do more, would I hamper my progress? And it's very, very hard to then know, right? Because it could be that you're making adaptations, but those adaptations lead just to you being able to recover. Or maybe you are making those adaptations and you are actually growing. And this is something that will only be visible in hindsight. over a long period of time as a natural athlete, unfortunately. I think that enhanced people would be able to draw some conclusions way faster than you. But then also there, it raises the question, do you really need to when you're kind of an enhanced person, enhanced in kind of literally every single way when it comes to the physiology.
This is where I went with Menno in the end, wasn't it? Where I was like, but, you know, some people argue about like having more rest days as you get more advanced and not having higher frequencies. And obviously Menno's very advanced, training 7 days per week, like at a very high frequency per muscle group. And then I was like, that comes generally from the enhanced side. And I was like, why do you think enhanced people train like this? He was like, it's kind of, he kind of made the statement of like, it's kind of old dogma. Like they have elevated muscle protein synthesis because of the drugs they're taking. So they don't necessarily even need to go and train a muscle that much. And a lot of the results they get, unfortunately, for a lot of those guys is despite what they do, not because of. And like the best coaches on that side tend to be the ones who are mostly clued into the drug side and can get good drugs. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, this is a whole different perspective I didn't really think about. As a natural, you don't have that element to think about. So it is all the other side. So yeah, you go off your experience, like you said, and like with athletes and how have they done from that. And that's the way you have to go. And then you always, unfortunately, it's a case of, oh, did they do well? And like remove the drug side. What about genetics? Maybe they're doing well because they have the genetics to do well. And you might then give someone a program that's relevant towards someone genetically superior to someone who's not genetically superior. Maybe that program just doesn't work. And this is why I guess you have to individualize. And we like those markers of recovery, pump, disruption, because that kind of clues you into that individual a little bit, even if they're not objective for the pump and disruption elements. But
now I can see when people are listening to that, right? And we have more questions than we have answers in that kind of regard.
Yeah.
Then people come quickly to the conclusion of like, once again, you're overthinking things. And I can definitely see that. And that's why I wouldn't really draw any kind of conclusions as to now you should train in that kind of specific way because we don't have the answers. So that's why you need to experiment. But I also do believe that leaving a little bit of room for experimentation is always a good thing. That doesn't mean that you need to dedicate 100% of everything that you're doing into experimentation, but maybe just a little bit, right? Because there is basically an exponential upside to it. Like, let's just say you are investing 5% of your resources into just experimenting a little bit. You're still going through ranges of motion. You're still training hard. You will probably still make progress, even if you experiment. However, if you find something that really works for you, the 5% of an investment may actually turn out to make a change of like 10% overall. All right, so the upside is so much more than there is any kind of downside, and that's why having a little bit of exposure into experimentation is also, I think, a good idea.
And I think it's important for an advanced trainee to have that experimentation, one, to learn, but secondly, also to keep things a little bit fresh and keep you a little bit excited. So I like trying new movements now and then and kind of new ideas, like maybe it's frequency that we adjust, but always from the understanding of these are the principles, does it align with those? It generally is not kind of completely outside the box and just completely random. So long as it's kind of got a good rationale behind it, I can completely see that and the room for that. But yeah, it's like you said, you definitely can overthink these things. And if you're seeing like very tangible results with what you're doing, like, and that's why only a small amount should be experimentation. And then once you've seen the experiment and it's maybe paid off, like, go with it. Like, that's not a bad thing. It's so hard though, because I know like there's no direct, like you do this and you see this, because a lot of results are delayed. So it's such a never-ending discovery.
That's why I also can understand why people are sometimes just falling back to what has worked in the past. Or like, all right, the bros and the old school people did that way, and we know that it works. Totally fair. Do that. It yields results. So you can definitely do that and take this as a baseline maybe and work from there. All right? But it would be, I think, just like just as the saying, as we already discussed the last time, of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I still stand by my word of what I said last week. I think that it's a lazy statement, and also a lazy perspective to have. You can fall back to, what's working. Take this and apply maybe some other principles and what you deem as appropriate. You don't just have to follow things blindly, but actually go to a place, visit it for yourself, and draw your own, or come to your own conclusion. Only because I told you that Tokyo is a freaking amazing city. I've never seen anything like that. Right? It's one of the most beautiful cities that I've ever been to. Doesn't mean that it's the most beautiful place on earth, and doesn't mean that if you go there, you perceive it as such as well. Right? So you can hear me out, and then it's up to you to actually come to your own conclusion. Right? Take this as a baseline argument, and then come up with your own stance at some point.
This leads me on to a complete change in topic, because I went to a wedding party over last weekend, and one of my old friends, who I haven't seen in years, lived in Tokyo for 2 years. He was telling me about Tokyo, which is where this kind of intersects. But I tried, and this does link a little bit, I tried an oyster for the first time ever. And I don't recommend it. But some people love oysters. So this works in completely, where it's just like, you got to try things in life. You got to experiment a little bit. I was quite apprehensive about trying one. I was like, do I really want to try this? It's like, what harm is it going to do? Let's try this thing. Lots of salt and seawater, it tasted like, with a little bit of goo. That was kind of my my feelings. Have you had an oyster, Pascal?
Never.
You haven't?
No.
I didn't get a boner straight afterwards, so aphrodisiac my ass. So
it's quite funny, though, isn't it? How society and what society views at sophisticated things, luxurious goods, how that changes with time. Because I know that, I think it's lobsters that back then, like ages ago, was more like food for peasants. And really? Now it's, buying a lobster is something that is kind of a luxurious good as well, right? Same goes then for oysters. I don't know how it was back then, but just you saying like it actually tastes like seawater, and yet it is something that is already kind of a status symbol when it comes to food as well.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, it just brought me back because of you talking about Tokyo, but also like trying things. It's only because I've tried it and I've had that from it. Doesn't mean you'll get the same experience. You may really enjoy it. And I think the same with like, various things that are in this, like it's a food. It's some people like it, some people don't. Like it's whatever. Same with training. Like there's many different ways to go about things, and experimentation is part of the process, and you got to enjoy that. And what I'd always bring it back to is if you can align your training within the fundamental principles, it's productive, it's causing growth. You don't necessarily know if it's the best or optimal. You never will. So that's where you have to start enjoying it. But if you can use science and you can use rational thinking, like Pascal's saying, in terms of recovery, like joints, things, pump disruption, progress objectively in the gym, maybe measurements or kind of how clothes are fitting or how you're looking, then that's like the golden zone, where people don't do that. They just see like, this influencer's doing this program, I do this. Or this guy's, I had it. I get frustrated sometimes with clients because they'll see someone doing an exercise. It happens quite rarely. And I am always like very kind in the way I say this with them. But they sometimes will see someone, I don't know, maybe it's Mike Israetel. He does an exercise and they're like, I just tried doing this exercise instead of the one we had in the program. And I'm like, why? Mike will rotate his exercises. He doesn't have he's not clued in to everything. His program is not the best program in the world. Maybe for him it is, but not for you. You got to kind of rationalize things a little bit more. So yeah, it's
there. So we can end on this note. Friedrich Nietzsche, he did a story about, or he came up with a story about Zarathustra or something like that. People can Google that, but the moral of the story is someone was actually leaving his farm behind because he was I think he was bored or he was looking for more purpose and meaning of life. Then he went out and found a mentor, and he learned a lot from him, right? Up to the point where he became a believer. So everything that Zarathustra, the mentor, said, the farmer just took on and just took it as such without ever questioning that. At some point, Zarathustra then said, like, okay, we need to split ways now, because you're not someone who's now here to learn. You're just here to believe. So we need to actually split paths or ways now, so that you can go out and experience or discover the world for yourself and see with your own eyes, instead of me telling you that this is there. Because it's something like, if I were to tell you, okay, Steve, if you now leave the house, if you look straight ahead, there's a mountain. Right? If you don't go out, you would think that this is the truth, right? But why do you believe me? There's no good reason, right? There's no good reason, because I could even be deceptive. And that's why you need to prove things for yourself at times. Of course, that doesn't mean that you can't ever trust people or their opinion or what it is that they've discovered. But it's always good to question even your mentor at times. And especially the ones that you're following on Instagram. And that also applies to us, of course, as well. The people who are listening to this episode, to us when we are talking about things, question our stuff. You don't have to be in agreement with us, right? Sometimes we also say shitty things that we then, at some point, will look back at and be like, what was I even thinking about this? Right? And just check that story out about Zarathustra and his student as well, from Friedrich Nietzsche, because it really, really applies to like you who's then following other people and just take it forward what it is that they are saying.
And a really cool addition to that is me and Brad Schoenfeld talked about it, and just how like a scientific minded person updates their views, and they will be wrong and they're allowed to update it. It's just like, don't make we're not selling our coaching brand off a single thing that's like, I don't know, you must do squats for big legs, for example, because then we're kind of putting ourselves in a dogmatic camp that is not necessarily true, and we're allowed to update our viewpoints. And you'll even see experts, and I've seen it even recently, where people have been talking about various subjects and they will disagree, and it's minutia stuff, but like there is no perfect exact answer. Science is always trying to get us closer to the truth. So don't feel like you've ever always like got that. And people make mistakes, whether or not it's intentional or not. Like I made a mistake on my story the other day. I said posterior tilt on my hips, and I meant anterior tilt. And if people didn't call me out on that, I would have not realized it, and I wouldn't have like I knew what I meant, but people might have interpreted exactly the opposite. And I'm like, fuck, if people are doing that exactly the opposite and they haven't understood it right, like I want to update myself. So it's good, like you said, stay skeptical, update your views. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and a good example is what society believed on how to raise kids. Just look back like 50 years ago. It has changed completely due to scientific evidence of what has then actually been shown to be the case of what's probably the way to raise your kids. And I'm quite certain that with time, with more observations, with technology, we will get to a point where we will look back 50 years from now at here today and realize a couple of things that we're doing now that are completely wrong, that we thought are the way to go about it. Because back then it was like thought that kids shouldn't be allowed to eat with you at the dinner table. They should actually be at their own dinner table, for example. And that is not the norm anymore. And also just like a good beating of the kids, right? Was tend to believe. I do remember when I was growing up, I got some spanks, right? And especially our parent generation, they got it real hard, right?
Yeah, school, man.
And
that's bad.
And just think about it right now. It's just something where you're just like, you're completely baffled and speechless when you hear about something like that. Right? But back then it was like, that was normal and thought that this is helpful for their growth and how they become like responsible adults and stuff like that. And that was also the overall general consensus. right? So things change and evolve, and we should update our views and stances on certain things with more evidence.
Yeah, I not to belabor this point, but I think it's just why sometimes in society, but you can bring it to the bodybuilding niche, sometimes the old ways stick around and people are slow to the newer ways. But in 50 years from now, maybe what we're doing, maybe, like assuming we're somewhat right, this will be like the norm, and people will have even, there be us, where there's these new concepts coming in with the scientific evidence, and people are slow to those maybe. So it's, ever evolving. It's very interesting. So yeah.
No, absolutely.
Good chat.
Cool. Then, as always, guys, thank you very much for listening, tuning in, and being here with us as always. One thing that I wanted to bring up is that we are now starting to slowly upload all of the presentations that we have created over the past 2 years and offering them for a very low price over on our shop at revivestronger.com. Check them out. Lots of presentations, lots of very, very good ones, if I can say that myself. Go check that one out. If you have any kind of questions, there's probably a presentation to it. So, and I'm still in the midst of uploading them. So give me a little bit more time so that I can upload all of them. But I just wanted to bring it up so that people are aware of that as well. But as always, thanks very much for tuning in. Leave a like, a subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section below. And I guess I'll speak to you guys very soon.
Cheers, guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.